Welcome to the Innovation Room, the space we explore the application of technology and AI in business, the practical and sometimes philosophical ideas shaping our future.
So, hi, welcome to the Innovation Room. Really excited to have you here with us today, Matt. I know we've had loads of great conversations, so it was definitely one that I wanted to get recorded for others to be part of with us. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, the leadership lens you bring, and how you're engaging with the AI age and leadership?
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. Yeah, great to be here. As you said, we've had a number of similar conversations and we just decided at some point it's probably good for us to record one of these because we always walk away excited and inspired by the conversations that we have. So yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Matt Bennett. I'm the president of West Peak in the US. I moved over to the US 8 years ago and founded West Peak just at the start of 2025. And my role focuses on leadership development of growing, scaling organizations, ones that are going through some strategic changes, ones that are going through growth, private equity and VC-backed businesses. And probably the number one conversation that I have with my clients at the moment is around AI. I'm a geek from a leadership perspective rather than from a tech perspective. So I work with businesses to focus on people-centric AI leadership, looking at how we can really start to embed change in organizations, how we can walk towards the light when it comes to AI rather than burying our heads in the sand, and really working with organizations that are going through kind of AI transformation, but from a people perspective versus from a tech perspective. And I think that's why we've bounced off well together in previous conversations, because we've both got slightly different lenses when it comes to AI, but together they pair really well.
Yeah, and what I loved so much, so obviously we serve a lot of similar types of clients, so we see similar pain points, but as you said, we might have different glasses on when we're looking at the challenges and opportunities they're facing. But one thing, even as a technologist, that in other episodes of the Innovation Room, we've talked about tech is almost the easy part and AI is almost the easy part. But actually leading people through this age and these changes are really the challenges. And just to set some context, so we're going to explore today some different topics around zombie businesses, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But before we dive in, with that context in mind, we like to start with an icebreaker. So the icebreaker for today, I'm mixing up and bringing that zombie business mindset in here. And if you could draft anyone, past, present, real, fictional, to help reboot a zombie company in the Innovation Room with AI, who gets the call from you and why?
Such a good question. I thought long and hard, and I started to think more about the type of people that I wouldn't want to do that for me, that then gave me kind of an inspiration on the person that I would want. So the people that I wouldn't want are people that are too technical, people that are going to make you feel bad about it because they're so far ahead in their knowledge, and people that just have a plan that is too well formed at the start because things are going to change really quickly. So the person that I thought of someone to identify and to revitalize a zombie business is Pedro Pascal's character Joel from The Last of Us. So he's great at spotting zombies. That's literally what he's known for. So be it at the very early stages of zombification, right the way through to those that are fully fledged mushrooms, he can spot them a mile off. And he's a person with a plan, but a plan that is ever changing because the landscape and the situation changes. And he uses the information and the data that he's got at hand to find the zombie businesses, to destroy those zombie businesses and get them to walk towards the light. So it would be Pedro Pascal. He's also very direct in the show. He's going to tell you how bad the situation is, regardless of how bad it actually is. And that is exactly what a zombie business needs, to have a harsh dose of reality and a plan to get you towards the light.
Love that. I love the mixture of the candor and directness, but also I love the language of directing towards the light. So I suspect that that might become a theme as we go through the conversation today. That's a really interesting one. I love, like, every time I have this conversation, there's always a new angle or something that people think about that I haven't. So Yeah, really, really interesting.
Good.
And of course, the context. I love that you started by process of elimination.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see how people think about it. Yeah. So let's start with talking about exactly what you just mentioned, how we could spot the zombie businesses. So let's talk a bit about what a zombie business is and how you spot the Walking Dead. So how do you know a business in 2025, like today's day and age? What are the telltale signs that leaders are missing right now?
Yeah, so we work with all sorts of businesses at all different stages of their AI journey, all different stages of their strategic growth. And the things that I've been having the most conversations about recently kind of fall into three different areas when it comes to spotting a zombie business. Ones that are not accepting that AI is the pathway that they should be taking, ones that are burying their heads in the sand, ones that are really just not seeing that this is how they need to be working. And those three different levels, firstly, it's the top down, really. So at the very organizational level, I still speak to businesses each week who have an AI ban. So ones that just don't feel as if it is something that is going to have an effect on them, that they're more nervous about the negative impact of data protection and of compliance when it comes to some of the horror stories that they may have seen publicized in the press around data leaks. And as a result, they've got a complete ban on AI. So at the organizational level, probably a terminal zombie business is one that has a complete AI ban. At the next layer down, and this is probably the more common one, it's where I speak to leaders and they say, I know I need to be doing something about AI, but I just don't know where to start. So people that have just got that kind of fear of AI, not an understanding of it, not really feeling that they understand the tech enough to be able to lean into it. And therefore, they're just almost paralyzed by that sense of fear of not being able to do anything about it and having no support and no idea of where to start. That is definitely a zombie business because they are the ones that should be creating and driving the strategy and impacting the rest of the business. Interestingly, the third layer is probably the most competent layer, and that is where the staff in the business are the most competent, but they're not doing anything about it to really then drive that strategy upwards through the organization. So they're using their own devices. They are working with AI in a way that is very self-serving rather than team-serving. They're not sharing the prompts. They're not sharing the tools that they're using. They're not sharing the value that it's adding to them with their team or with the rest of the business. And therefore, it's being used really well, but in isolation. So regardless of whether that's kind of a top-down challenge or a bottom-up challenge, those are probably the most consistent three things that I see on a weekly basis in businesses that just shows me that they're not driving forwards as a cohesive team to get to that complete AI strategy that they need.
Yeah, it's interesting because from whatever angle you come at with that, some of the things that I hear are people a few phrases like, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if we're winning business, if we're selling revenue, we'll get there eventually. So that's one of the things that I would say is a bit of a worry when I hear leaders not at least exploring a plan or doing something with it. I would have a question for you. It's a bit of a controversial one, but do you think a business can be jolted back? And this will lead me into the next question in a moment. But do you think a business can be jolted back if from the top, assuming even they have the competent layers in between, but if from the top we don't have a CEO or an executive team, for example, who is willing to engage or have a plan around integrating AI, do you think there is hope?
I do. I think there is, because often those CEOs may not be the CEOs that last very long with that kind of mindset in an organization. And secondly, mob mentality, that actually at some point there's got to be such a groundswell of feeling about these things that eventually those more deaf CEOs when it comes to AI have to listen. They have to see that there is a future in there, and they have to listen to that kind of mob mentality of what is bubbling up through the organization. So it will take some self-reflection, it will take change, and it will take curiosity. But I do believe that any business can be turned around. And I was talking to a company yesterday, and they've just gone through exactly that, from an absolute silence when it comes to AI to a very fast turnaround that they need to work towards. So yeah, I've seen evidence for the positive.
That's nice. Again, you're leading to the light.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things, those practical plays that leaders can do to jolt their business if they're fearing that they're moving towards the sides of losing ground and becoming a zombie business?
Yeah, so I've heard AI used in a couple of ways and described in a few ways, and one of them probably resonates more than the other for me. So the first is that AI is an enthusiastic intern. Someone wants to do a really good job, but you wouldn't put in front of your best customer. And I think that has been for leaders some of the mindset that they have, which is that we know that we need to play around with it a little bit, but we don't really want to be seen as putting it at the forefront. Versus other leaders that have described it to me as a superhuman exoskeleton. So it's that kind of additions to how you think and how you work that are adding a leading edge to how you're performing and how your business is growing. So for me, the first transition is that mental mind shift of not using AI, but thinking with AI. And thinking with AI to enhance the things that you're not as productive in doing, the things that you're not as good at doing, the things where you've got your best minds in the room to create an idea and a strategy. And it's then that additional lens that pushes it that little bit further, or makes you think in a different way that you haven't done before, or makes you more efficient and more effective in how you're doing things. And not having this big kind of fear of how do I use AI, but actually how do I expand my thinking from my current way of thinking to a more flexible or a more future thinking way of doing it, or a faster way of doing it using AI as the tool to do so. And I've seen and worked with a lot of leaders who have done that kind of transition from that mindset of how are we going to use AI as a business to how do I think with AI as an individual leader.
Love that. It's really interesting. There's something in the simplicity, and I still do this every day. So when I just even have informal conversations today, I was in a meeting with my sales team and we were using AI, like speaking to it to think about how we could approach a different strategy with different opportunities. And we hadn't brought that into the room in that way before today. For example, we have used other tools, don't get me wrong. But the point is, if we didn't have a challenge to ourselves of trying a new way to use it every day, we wouldn't be able to keep ahead. So that little basic one little change of thinking every day can make massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first practical step really is for leaders to understand how to be prompt engineers. If they haven't mastered that yet, it's the first thing to do. So understanding language that you need to include, how you want AI to act, what's the purpose, what's the inputs, what's the data. Really getting familiar with AI prompt writing is probably the first step. If you haven't mastered that yet, that's a simple thing that you can do. There's loads of guides out there that you can do. You can use AI to help you use AI. So thinking with AI and using those prompts more effectively is so useful.
Yeah, I completely agree. What do you think in terms of, again, if we think of it as a jolt, what I like is there's simplicity in it, but how do you get people to take that step? Like, what is the sort of kick that needs to happen to start thinking differently? Because the one challenge I might have there is you don't know what you don't know. So the prompt engineering is a good step, but is there any other techniques that if someone's listening and they're like, my board needs to hear this or my team needs to hear this, what would be a good way to help them see what they don't know?
Yeah, I was working with a leader yesterday and they said, one of the challenges that I find that I'm facing is that I'm having the same meeting over and over again, probably 3 or 4 times a week about AI and how to work with AI and what needs to be done about it. But I find myself repeating the conversations more than actually we're getting any tangible results from it. And I said, well, why don't you think with AI and start to record those conversations, transcribe them, combine them all, and then get AI to share how much data you've repeated in those 3 or 4 meetings each week. How much time are you wasting going through the same kind of things over and over again? And think with AI to create a usage case of time wasted and efficiency and the type of work that we could be doing differently. And using AI to create a case for AI was a really good way that they started to think differently around it. And working with AI to find that data, to find a way to really see that there is a usage and a test case for we need to move from where we are now to where we want to get to drive the strategy forwards. And they went away and they started to use it and they started to transcribe the meetings and started to see the amount of repetition that was happening on a daily basis, having the same conversation, but nothing was changing. And now they've got the data behind it.
Love that. Really good example. So let's talk a bit about risk and reward. So you mentioned earlier a bit of fear factor still with AI and a lot of these potential zombie businesses, or perhaps they just think they can, ride on some coattails later in terms of existing tech or things out there. Now, what is an AI misstep that you think could actually finish a zombie off for good? So I know you said you think everyone is redeemable, but what could finish them off, and how do they dodge that situation?
Yeah, so if I hear the phrase, it's the future of work, it's probably the last nail in the coffin, because AI is not the future of work. AI is the today of how other organizations, except for yours, are working. So when I see people and hear people talking too much in future terms of this is what the future of work is going to be like, come on, we're definitely in that phase already. I was down in San Diego last week and was working with a client, and somebody said something with me that really stuck. She said, every role is changing in every single company. The only question that we should be asking ourselves is, do I want to change here or do I want to change elsewhere? Because regardless, your role is changing. I just thought it was a really good way for someone who's relatively junior in an organization to see that every company is changing, every role is changing. It's not the future, it's the now. And the only question you need to ask is, do I want to change on this ship or do I want to jump ship and change in a different one? Because regardless, everyone is changing. And so if you're working in an organization that is saying that this is the future of work, we need to press pause on that, because it's the now of work.
That's a really good example of, it's really hard to come back from that, because, and I was thinking about it the other day, where I am hearing leaders saying, their fear or they're waiting, or, and the concern I have with that is, we get exposed, both of us in our world, to see how different people are adopting and thriving with AI already. And really what we're calling it is like the business evolution. The flywheel is that people are augmenting their business with AI. That's the reality. And we don't need to get into all the technical jargon of agents and all of these things. Really, all it means is everyone's taking parts of what they do today and they're augmenting themselves with that. And those are and whether that's creating some new customer value, or whether that's fixing, we're in a bit of a productivity crunch. So you're hearing a lot about labor going up, retirees going up. There's a crunch on outputs and they're flat. So the only real solution is bringing AI in. So I say all of that because I think there's, for me, one of the missteps that I'm seeing continuously is, yes, saying it's the future, but also thinking that it's still a tool that they can plug into their business, and they're not understanding that it's changing the skill set of their people. And I would say that, going back to your mindset shift point, if pretty quickly you don't start seeing them able to change that thinking, that could be a nail in the coffin. And again, I think it's just not understanding maybe the concept of AI being different than a technology, if that makes sense. It is a technology, but it's also an intelligence that can do so much more.
Absolutely. It's a technology with an impact, and it's an impact that changes how we work, how we communicate, how we engage, how we interact, how we perform, our go-to-market strategy, our customers. It changes everything. It's not just a little plugin that's going to make things a little bit faster for you. It's something that has a wider impact. And as soon as leaders start to see that AI is just the stone in the middle of the pond, it's the ripples of the impact that it positively has outside of that, and some of the challenges that it can face as well, and some of the guardrails that we need to put on to make sure that that ripple is a positive one. But as soon as they start to see the wider impact, that's when hopefully leaders start to see it's not the future of work, but actually it's how many organizations are working today.
So let's talk about impact. Boards love numbers. How do you, and I can say it, I do too, don't get me wrong, I'm guilty. How do you prove AI's value without drowning in metrics?
Don't start with the tech. Put the tech to one side and put the people first. So think in terms of the vision, the mission, putting people first and engaging them in the solution, and then seeing that it's not about some kind of plug-in or shiny new toy, but it's about the impact that it has, how it's accelerating growth, customer retention, speed to market, whatever the end goal that you want to get from that actually is. And then tell the story. How do we want to get there? What's the change that we want to see? What's the impact that AI is going to have on that journey? And then be really clear on the opportunity cost. What if we don't do this? What's going to happen if we don't take this step? What's going to happen if we don't embrace this and work in this particular way? I think AI years are like dog years. If you are a year behind your competitors on a calendar year, it's probably about 5 years behind it in AI years, similar to dog years. And then start to look at the financial impact and look at the data afterwards. But for me, it's about the strategy and the mission and the vision, first of all. Create that clear picture of the value, involve the people, share the opportunity cost of what if we don't do it, and then back that up with the data and the numbers afterwards, because you'll win more hearts and minds. And if fear is one of the main inhibitors of not influencing a clear AI strategy, then don't start with the tech, don't start with the numbers, start with the people.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll just pause there for a second. You're the first person I've ever heard talking dog years for AI, but I do like that because it's very relatable. And we talk a lot about when we hear language like ROI with AI, with ROI. And of course, we all use that language, but I think there's also one thing we try to talk about is return on change, because as you noted, there's probably a risk and there's probably even some losses that you need to take to build the culture of being able to work with it, all of the things that come with that. But then how do you quantify that dip for what if we don't? So that was a really interesting take on that, because that's one good way to look at it. Well, what if we don't? This could be a 5 times negative potentially for us. Which we might be selling now, our revenue might be stable or growing, but what if we don't? What's going to happen? Yeah. So I really like that. So let's talk about the future-proof leaders. And that's really an interesting one, because as you say, AI isn't the future, it's now, but the future of AI is not certain. So what does that look like in terms of how you get teams, build the energy, ensure they're not panicked, and they're, engaging with AI agents? So when we say AI agents, we just mean those, AI team members that are completing part of your job spec that are helping you achieve the output together. How do you handle that? And what do you do?
Yeah, so I guess the first step is to put yourselves in their shoes and understand what that panic is and where it's coming from. And it is essentially the fear that AI is going to take their jobs. The jobs that most of us do in 2025 are not jobs that our parents had ever heard of, that our grandparents ever thought of. Our nieces and nephews' roles, our children's roles aren't going to be roles that we've ever heard of ourselves. So the evolution of work is nothing new, but the pace is definitely faster than ever. I was reading a really interesting article the other day about the change in skills in different roles, and one that came up was journalism, and the real change in the shift in journalists from being writers to being content creators and using AI to support that content, and that they are essentially now journalist programmers. So people who combine journalistic skills with programming knowledge to create kind of data-driven interactive stories, news for news organizations, because the requirement for volume of news is higher than it's ever been. So therefore the pace of AI and being able to use it and program it in that way is a different style of journalism that's never really been in there before. And that applies to every single type of role that's out there. So as a leader, if we're going to stop our teams from being panicked and pumped about it, firstly, you have to buy into it yourself, because they're going to see the fear in your eyes if you're an individual who doesn't necessarily agree with this or believe in it. So firstly, believe in it yourself. Secondly, involve the team. So I know a couple of really good examples where HR teams, and actually they're HR teams in tech organizations, have created AI agents, but they've done it with their HR teams as an example. So they spoke to their HR teams. They asked them, what are the bits of their roles that they are spending the most time on, the bits that they don't enjoy doing, and the parts that they would like to see taken over by some kind of AI agent. And they all agreed on those kind of lower level tasks that they wanted AI to manage. And it felt as if it was created from the bottom up rather than the top down. They also interestingly asked the business what it is that they wanted from an HR AI agent. And they said exactly the same thing. And they said they hate going to HR and asking the same thing over and over again because they feel silly doing it. So collectively, all of those lower level tasks that the business don't like to ask and the HR team don't like to answer are now taken by an AI agent. They've given it a name, a job title, anthropomorphized it by calling it Charlie, seeing that it's got a seat in the HR team, given a performance review, and just used as a really effective AI agent that is now allowing the rest of the HR team to level up the conversations. The business doesn't feel silly going to ask those same questions over and over again. And rather than feeling that it's taking their jobs, it's helping to level up the HR team to have more strategic conversations, more in-depth conversations, and less firefighting. I just thought it was a great example of the people first AI leadership that then removes that doubt and that fear from an AI agent.
Yeah, I really love that. And what excites me about that is we're starting to hear more and more. So that story, we were very fortunate about almost 8 years ago. We had a client we started that journey with, and they were one of the first of their kind that I saw pioneer that. So what's exciting to me is that there's businesses on all stages of the journey, and seeing how that kind of business completely changed over that span of time. And now as the capabilities increase, so too does their team's ability to navigate that. So now the sort of the positive loop of almost panic doesn't exist anymore. You get to a point that once you build that culture, that is that future-proof leader, that whatever comes with the technology, as the models change and all of a sudden new capabilities come, it's enthusiasm and an appreciation for the complexity that might come. But it's a very different mindset. Equally, I think in terms of the energy that we see, when we do see the fear factor, I think sometimes it's also because how conversations are formed. So what I liked with what you said is, in the consultative process of trying to identify the right opportunities and bring the team along, sometimes it doesn't even have to be having a conversation focused on getting to a solution. And I think sometimes people miss that. So my observation is some of the best, you can imagine in our business, most of what we talk about is technical solutions. Some of the best conversations I've had is actually more like we have our Geeks program to champion women in business and tech. So when we did a focus group on what they think AI will do for the future of women in tech and business leadership, the conversation that came out of that, and just thinking about some things that came out of that were, for example, women sometimes get imposter syndrome in meetings, and the fact that they could feel like they have a place to ask something before to feel more confident going into a room, just those conversations, then all of a sudden you see that unlock different levels of thinking and different openness to engage with AI. And it's sort of, how you were talking about the fear factors and afraid of taking the jobs, then it starts to become, oh my goodness, what else is possible? So that's what's so exciting to me about what I love about the leaders and that team that I was even talking about there. I'm like, they're going to think of things with AI that I would never think about.
Completely, yes. And the level of thinking that always gets us to this problem or this challenge that we're in is never going to get us out of it if we're using the same minds. And AI is the opportunity to use the same minds, but with that superhuman exoskeleton to come up with these exciting different ways of thinking that we've never had in organizations before.
100%. So what single skill or mindset will separate the leaders from the pack? How do you see them when you're working with your clients or your
Probably the biggest one, and this is for leaders, but also through all of the organization, is curiosity. So hiring people who are curious, who are experimental, who have that kind of questioning mindset of always wanting to find a different way or a faster way. I was listening to an interview with Mike Pell, who's the director of the Microsoft Garage, if you're American. And that is their company-wide innovation program. And he was the guy that invented the PDF. And he talked very much in terms of asking for forgiveness, not for permission, when it comes to curiosity being a necessity in a business, that we should be working with people who are wanting to find the shortcuts. They want to find a better way to do it. And if they prove it or if they disprove it, either way, at least they're being innovative and curious and creative to try and find a different way of doing so. So whether someone has asked you to find a sharper, faster, different way of doing something or not, you've still got the ability to. You've still got the mandate to be able to go out there and try something different and come back and tell us if it works, or come back and tell us if it doesn't. Both are equally valid, because we're failing fast in these kind of situations to come up with better and different ways of thinking and different ideas. Where businesses lack that, where there is a top-down structure, where there's that sense of being told what to do. One organization I was working with last week described it as the worker bees versus the thinker bees. So the worker bees that have kind of been told from the queen bee down through the hive as to what to do, we're now asking them to become thinker bees, actually ones that are thinking from the ground upwards and informing the queen as to what's going on in the hive, which I thought was another great analogy of those kind of curious businesses. But it's a big transformation trying to get people from being a worker to being a curious bee.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I guess if I were to champion those leaders, that'll separate them from the pack. I think the hard thing, and it's a question we didn't plan to explore, but I'd also maybe ask then, what do businesses need to do to nurture that? Because it's hard to fight against the wrong culture, right? It's hard to, there's only so much, even the worker bees versus like even changing something like that is not something that, well, I mean, it can be something one person can do. I wouldn't want to discourage that. It happens. It absolutely happens, but you might lose them in the process. So what are your views on that?
Yeah, so taking this business as an example, they know that this is not going to be an overnight culture change. We can't just flick a switch and go from a worker organization to a thinker organization. So their whole ethos is around entrepreneurialism and looking at collaboration between teams and looking at how we can shift that as a culture, but really understanding, firstly, what the legacy is that we need to let go of, and what the legacy is that we need to be proud of, and what we can retain and maintain. So what are the things that we need to think of as the past way of doing things? And what are the things that we need to think of as the future ways of doing things? Then once we know what we need to let go of and what we need to maintain, how do we do that? How do we let go of these things? So how do we empower others around us to take decisions that maybe we've taken before? How do we delegate work to others around us that maybe we don't need to be doing any longer, to free ourselves up to be thinking differently and to be working differently and to be collaborating differently? But you've really got to have that kind of line in the sand moment of what is the older culture and what is the newer culture, and really defining what the differences between the two are and supporting people to let go. Otherwise, if we're just asking to flick a switch, it's not going to work.
And I guess the one just on this future-proof leaders, what from your perspective and the work you're doing with Westpeak, what are the because some people might argue that you can't transition a worker bee to a thinker bee, or if I were to try to be the devil's advocate there, what are some ways that you might encourage people to approach this shift? And is it sometimes going to be a matter of, people moving on and hiring new people, or is it something like, how would you tackle this within a business?
Yeah, it's going to be a different journey for different people. Some people are naturally curious. Some people embrace change. They walk towards change. This is a typical change management process like any others that organizations have gone through. And businesses have gone through so many changes, so many strategic iterations, so many pivots. Think of the things that have worked really well and effectively for you and your business in the past as to how you've got people on board. And the main thing for me is always to communicate and to over-communicate until people are sick of being communicated to. The biggest challenge when it comes to any transition or any change like this is having a void of information, because that void of information will be filled with misinformation and it will be filled with assumption, and that is going to lead us down the wrong path. So at an organizational level, it's really about having a crystal clear vision, communicating that regularly, so much so that people can repeat it verbatim and that they stand behind it. And if people are paying lip service towards that vision and actually not standing behind it, they will probably self-serve their own exit to work somewhere else. But as I quoted earlier on, I think that the challenge that people are facing now is, do I change with this organization, or do I need to change with another organization? Because many organizations are going through this shift. Many roles are going through this shift. Many of the skills that we need in our work is going through this shift. So it's really a question of, where do I want to change, not do I need to change?
And I think this also presents a great opportunity for businesses now, because I think we all know that innovation, diversity in experience, background, et cetera, breeds the best innovation. So I don't think that's an argued fact, but I think from a point of view of when people are changing, I think this is also an opportunity for people and businesses in particular to look outside of what they have done previously. So you might be in law, but perhaps you should consider someone in construction, for example. Like there's different, the way the world thinks and works now, AI is almost leveling a lot of playing fields that I think it can create new opportunities. So we do see some industries but I mean, it always happens this way, where some industries are taking different hits at different times. And we've seen, some layoffs over the last few years, unfortunately. I see that as a huge opportunity for those businesses that are trying to make these kind of changes, to be open-minded, to bring in some of these potential leaders, those curious people, but perhaps think differently to the way their organization works now. Are you seeing that a lot in your clients? Are they being open-minded to, where they find their talent now?
Definitely, because the need for technical skills is naturally going to reduce over time. It's the need for the human skills that are going to elevate leaders and to drive businesses forwards. So I'm seeing a lot at the C-suite level, where they're bringing in experts in a particular area, that actually it's more about their human characteristics versus their technical skills, and how they can then take their experience from other industries and apply that to new industries, new markets, new customers, new industries that they haven't necessarily had that direct experience in, but it's the way that they transformed previous industries is the most important thing that they can now drive into new, different, exciting industries. So yeah, I'm seeing that a lot. One of the clients I'm working with, their CEO has just joined and they've come from a completely different background than this very traditional background that they're now working in. And they are pivoting everything that is going on in that organization at a rapid pace, focusing on change, but doing it in a way that is bringing everybody with them rather than leaving people behind.
Nice. So one last shot of wisdom for our audience today, if you don't mind. What if you were to give our listeners some actions that they can go and do today and keep their business alive and kicking or thriving? So if they're, hopefully they've seen some warning signs if they're in the zombie business side, but even if they're not and they want to thrive even more, what would be something they can go and do today to help them move in the right direction?
So the first two things. First is mindset. So it's about thinking of AI as an ally. It's not a competitor. It's something that is going to support you. It's going to support your development. And if you're thinking that way, if you're thinking that it has value that it can add to you, your team, your business, your industry, your growth and your career, then others around you are going to start to feel the same. So building that sense of psychological safety of you being on board, you sharing your vulnerability around it with your team and hearing the same back from them is going to drive the mindset shift forwards that we need. The second one, and let's bring this down to something really practical, is how I use AI every day. So I use AI as my weekly operating system. So I shared with it at the start of the quarter the top goals that I wanted to focus on over the next 3 months, detailed exactly what I wanted to achieve, and then every day add in what I've achieved in that day. And it tells me exactly what I need to do the next day. It creates my weekly plan for me. It gives me visual aids on where I'm spending more or less time. And I've prompted it in a way that gives me feedback that is the kind of things that I don't need to hear as well. So it gives me open, transparent, direct feedback as to what I can be doing differently. And it's created my own weekly operating system for me. So really tangible, but really practical. And that's how I manage my time much more effectively.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I mean, I was going to say we could do something awkward like try to be zombies, but I think we would scare off our audience. So maybe we'll take a pass on that. But thank you for joining. And I definitely know there were some great tidbits in there for our audience. And hopefully some people will be taking this forward and helping them navigate the next stage in their AI journey. So thanks so much for joining us, Matt.
Thank you for having me. And if anybody does need any support in doing so, that's what we're working with our customers to do and support them with. So please feel free to reach out. But Lindsay, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.